Thanksgiving this week. Any fans of Thanksgiving? Whose favorite holiday is Thanksgiving? Oh, geez, no. Okay, this side of the room likes turkey. This side of the room. Who's hosting this week? Who's cooking? Who's just eating? All right, all right. I love this little lull before it all starts kicking in, right? And Thanksgiving is a chance to pause and to be together. And I think about us being together a lot with this question: why do we gather? Why do we do this? You choose to come here, and for some of you, it's kind of a risk. Seems weird. It's something new. For some of you, it's just what we do. It's a habit, a lifestyle. For some of, and I'll stop saying you, for some of us, it's an obligation, a duty, checkbox, done. And for some of us, there's curiosity, there's this like dissonance going on, there's questions, there's a wrestling, and that becomes, for some of us, however you approach this place, however you arrive here, it becomes fuel. It becomes something that gets in you. No matter how you come to it, it gets in you because you come back. Here you are again. And we have expectations of what this is, church, right? There's something about getting together as a group where we have music, we sing, and we receive communion on some Sundays, pray, and there is something different about that when we're together. And then there's this piece, the teaching. And sometimes, I've grown up in the church, I've been in the church forever, right? Born into it. And sometimes there's this idea that there's going to be an expert standing here who has the answers, who knows it all, who has the degrees, who it's their job, this is what they do, and they are going to dazzle you with their insight, their knowledge, and you can just sit back and decide, am I going to accept that or not, and kind of be passive in it. And I am not that person. There is nothing expert about me. I am just one of you, and a fellow Jesus follower, fellow struggler, fellow person on the path. And all I'm doing today is sharing with you what I've learned, what I think I know, or what I'm still figuring out. And so I would much prefer to treat this as a conversation. It's hard to have a conversation with 100 people, 100 plus, however many's here. And yet, I don't know, there's something already about this morning. I can already feel it starting to dissipate. Don't let it go. Let's relax and kind of the living room feel, kind of the holiday Thanksgiving feel, where you're among friends, you're among family, and we get to have a conversation and truly be Christ to each other. No matter where you are on that path, wherever you are with Jesus, the scripture calls us a royal priesthood. We're all priests. We're all his children. And we have the ability to minister to one another in unique ways. And as I was driving here, I was thinking about kind of some of the moments that have happened here. I still remember when Mark brought in a student, a girl, I think she was 4th or 5th grade, and she sang Rise Up. Man, that was a moment, right? I remember when Dawn and Norm Leland sat up here and told their story about Dawn's cancer and what she's still battling today. And we prayed for them, and in that moment, not because it was a ritual or because it was something you're supposed to do, I watched people's hands go out. Whether you believe that there's a power of healing, whether you believe, whatever you believe in that gesture, I watched people's hands go out to them in a visible embrace, like the love. And they still need that, by the way. Still need our prayers and support. And so there's something about this gathering that is unique and important. And I want to say one thing too, Ruth. A couple weeks ago, I know, just about how we are Christ to each other. It was like you can go and talk and say hi to everybody, which I've just neglected to do, I realize, so sorry. But it was during that time where we usually greet each other and yada yada. And I was walking by, and she opened her arms and hugged me and held on. Have you ever had somebody do that to you? And I'm not a big hugger, okay? I'm an awkward hugger. I've said that before. So for me, it's a little bit like, okay. But she hugged me, and I felt Jesus, felt love. And it was rich and powerful. And those are the moments that happen in this room when we treat this gathering like that. So let's try to do that. First of all, there is this table here with a bunch of stuff on it. And what my goal is, along with having a conversation with you, my goal is to catalyze a gratitude practice for each person. How many of you would say, I do practice thankfulness. I practice gratitude. It's a lifestyle for me. Wow. Okay, so who wants to come up here and have a seat? You're grateful I'm in the hot seat. On this table are the ways in which I practice gratitude. And I am a jumbled kind of thinker, so I'm going to start rambling around. Bear with me, and hopefully it will make sense. If there's something up here that I don't end up talking about and you want to know about it, say, hey, what about that? But all of these pieces up here represent something about the practice of gratitude and how I live it out. So there's note cards, there's a gratitude list, there's a jar of pennies, there's some rusty nails. The timekeeper, hate that. Oh, and this jar, get to that. So these are all of the ways that I have worked gratitude into my life. And I see a chiropractor. Shout out to Dr. Cunha. He's fantastic. Woo! He's great. And he asked me recently, so, because I've been having some, pains and whatnot, and he's like, so if you're not gonna, I haven't been running, folks. All my runners who were kind of talk to me after that. And he's like, so if it's not going to be running, what is your exercise? What's your exercise going to be? I was like, isn't our time up? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, it's very simple. It's the one you'll do. That's what your exercise is. Like, so this table is the same. What's the one for you? The one you'll do. Whichever one. So let's dive in with some scripture. And I have two stories, and I didn't ask anybody to do this ahead of time. So I have two stories. The first story from the book of Luke, they both are, is the one that's a little bit more straightforward, and I want to spend less time on it, even though it's a little longer. There's a second story. So that's the one that I really want to key in on. So I would like to see if there is somebody under the age of 18 in this room, there's only a very few of you, I'm so sorry, who would be willing to come and read this. I promise you there's no hard words. But I'd like to hear a younger person's voice. No pressure. It's all good.
Now, on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus traveled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." As they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan.
Yes.
Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except for this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well."
Who's heard that? You may sit down. Who's heard that story before? Okay, yep, it's pretty familiar. I wanted somebody who was younger to read it because that's how I hear it. Because I heard that story when I was like 5, you know? And it's an easy story to build into as a child, definitely. There's good guys and bad guys, right? So who are the good guys? Who's the good guy? Oh, Jesus, wow, we're even back to that. Okay, Jesus isn't the only answer to any of these questions. I know Jesus is the answer, but there's 10 lepers. How many are bad? Oh, we've got some controversy already. I love it. So somebody said 10. All right. 9 don't come back and say thank you, right? 1 does. Okay, so, it becomes like the good and the bad, easy divisions, easy categories, right? And one of the things that I love about Jesus in the scriptures is you'll find that often when he's asked a question, he'll answer with what? Another question. And so when people would come to him and say, "Well, what does this mean?" he would say, "Well, what do you think it means? How do you read it?" And so that's what we're going to spend a little time doing with that scripture. Is it up there? Yeah. So when you hear this story, we've done this before, so I hope you'll just chime in. What is noteworthy to you about it? What stands out? You can just say the word. It can be a single word. It doesn't have to be a whole thought. If you have a whole thought, feel free to share it. What stands out? Being thankful. A loud voice. Okay. Yeah. There was a colony. Anybody know anything about leprosy that time? They were segregated. So it was contagious. And the leprosy that, if you Google it now, it is probably something different than what was happening then. But it was visible. It was something to do with the skin. It was contagious. And so if you had it, there was no cure for it. And so you were in a colony. You were put out into a group. And it was just funny. You were considered unclean if you were Jew. Yes, you were. When I read about leprosy in Wikipedia, it said it was contagious to humans and potentially armadillos. I'm not kidding you. Fun fact, armadillos. Anyway, you were in a colony. You were outside of the gathering. You were outside. You were away from your family. You were an outcast. And let's see, what else about that group? Anything else stand out about that group? They stood at a distance for that purpose, I would think, right? So as to not contaminate or bring harm to anybody else. Those were the rules. What else about that group? They spoke with one voice. They did. They believed Jesus could heal them. Maybe. They said, "Have mercy." They had heard about his healing, so this happens in the book of Luke. And so Jesus has already healed a bunch of people, and word has gotten out. So yes. Are they all Jews? No. There's one who's a Samaritan. What do we know about Samaritans? Anything? They were despised. They're the bad guys. Boo, hiss. They were part of the Jewish culture, but not practicing Judaism the way they were supposed to, etc. They were looked down upon by the Jews. And which one comes back? The Samaritan. That interesting. One of the things that I read about gratitude is we often feel it more when it's a stranger who does it for us. So let's say your family members can, I won't have a good example because I haven't thought this through, but it's much easier to take for granted your family, somebody you expect things, than somebody that you have no expectations of. And so it's possible that for this Samaritan, he's along for the ride. Maybe Jesus will do this. Maybe he won't do it for me. I'm not a Jew. And it says, as they were going, they were healed. I don't know if the Samaritan ever made it to show himself to the priest. I don't know what happened there. Why did the other 9 not come back? We don't know. These are all things that Jesus leaves us, the author leaves us to think about and ponder. So the second story, oh, see, I've already skipped ahead. One of the things that stands out to me about this story is how easy it is to overlook saying thank you. And why? How many are quick to write the thank you note? How many are like deliberate thank you note writers? Anybody? Okay, just a few. Tends to be women, sure. I have a friend who is the thank you note will be in the mailbox by the time I get home, like that kind of thing. How many of us mean to, right? I'm in that category. I mean to. In fact, this week, like one of the practices on this table is writing the thank you note, taking the time to write the thank you note. And so I had this on my table, and I was like, I really should write one. And then I thought, I don't have time for that. And so I set a timer on my phone. You know how long it took me to write a thank you note? Just guess. 1.5 minutes. I'm like, well, I certainly have 1.30 minutes. Thank you notes have been shown in studies where now we're studying gratitude and its benefits, right? It's good for you. That people who were undergoing counseling for depression, they were treated by counseling, and then there were some that were asked to journal about, the stuff they were going through, and then there were some that were asked to write thank yous to people. The group that wrote the thank yous had higher scores in terms of their well-being, their sense of happiness, their mood elevated. And those results stayed. They didn't dissipate. So something as small as a thank you note starts to rewire the brain and starts to change things. And what the study ended with, and with the version I read, the results accrue. Over time, they accrue. So all of these little pieces of gratitude, they're all small. Coming back to say thank you is small, but not. It's subtle, the beauty that gratitude can work in us. It's an uncomfortable posture. Because when you're saying thank you, you're humbling yourself. You are on the receiving end, and you are not the source. And so think about, we're going to get ready to do this, I'll call it a practice that we have as a church of giving and receiving, where those of us who are equipped to give financially give. And those of us who need to receive. And there is this, we've talked about it so many times, there's this uncomfortable experience in that. Humbling. And yet, it is beautiful. It is us being Jesus to each other in both parts of that. And we never know which part we're going to be on. So, the next story. Could I have somebody older for this one? Anybody? It's short.
Luke 17, 7 through 10. Suppose one of you has a servant plowing or looking after the sheep. will he say to the servant when he comes in from the field, 'Come along now and sit down to eat'? Won't he rather say, 'Prepare my supper, get yourself ready, and wait on me while I eat and drink? After that, you may eat and drink'? While he thanked the servant because he did what he has told to do, so you also, when you have done everything you were told to do, should say, 'We are unworthy servants. We have only done our duty.'"
Thank you. You may be seated. So this is one of those stories that doesn't make Jesus look too good. All right? It comes across as harsh. And I want you to take a minute and just read it for yourself and let it sink in. How many of you have ever read this story before, heard this story before? Fewer of us, I'm sure. It's just before the 10 men with leprosy, just before that story. Read that through. And then I'm going to ask you, talk to each other for a few minutes, however you want to do that. Make little groups. If you're already in groups, that's great. If not, find somebody close by and have a little conversation here. This one is less straightforward. It's a little more troubling. It's a little more like, huh? What? And so I want to ask you to talk about it. I don't have specific questions to give you because I want you to bring your own questions to it if you can. But I want you to think about the word unworthy, servant. That's a word we're not very comfortable with. So, and then let's just start with that. So have a little conversation. I'm going to give you a few minutes. Get comfortable. If you need to get a drink, it's fine to get up and get something. It's okay. Have a little conversation about Jesus talking about a servant, and then that word unworthy that he uses to describe servant. And I mean, like, you can say anything. There's no wrong answer here. There's also no right answer. So, kind of how does it hit you? How do you read it? Go ahead. Jesus was a master of the paradox. And he was also part of a particular culture at a particular time. We live in a society where servants, it's not acceptable. We don't consider ownership of another person something that God would ordain. The conversation's still going. It's still lively. I love it. I do. I want you to think about what you know or believe or have heard about Jesus that contradicts that story. Jesus is saying, servant comes in from working for you. Do you just let him sit down and say, "Here, eat with me"? No. Off you go. Make my meal. Wait on me. And then it's your turn. Does the master thank the servant for doing it? No. Because it's his job. It's what he's expected to do. A few chapters before in Luke is the story, in fact, I think it's only one, is the story of the prodigal, which we've spent a lot of time on, where the father does everything that no one expects him to do, where the son comes back from choosing his own way, and the dad should be keeping him in his place and doesn't, and says, "Come back in, open arms." And one of the things, I would love for you to take this story and keep wrestling with it, because it is one of those. It doesn't resolve easy. It is going to stick to you a little bit, and you're going to go, what was that? If you let it. So I'd like to just kind of leave that there. But one of the things that's difficult for us that I read into this story is it's hard for us to know our place. Because it sounds harsh. And yet, scriptures are full of these even poetic statements, like in Psalms, what is man that you're mindful of him? Why should God stoop to our level? And yet he does. But it's not owed to us. So that word unworthy, like we have a sign up there. You are worthy of love. And you are. But you haven't earned it. It's a gift. It's a gift because you are here. And you did nothing to get here. Here we are. It is a gift. And that uncomfortable posture is the path to gratitude. It's why it escapes us. It's why it's so kind of slippery and it slips through our fingers, and it just keeps going. I had a conversation this week, coffee with Emily. And we were talking about gratitude and mindfulness. How many of you have heard of mindfulness? This is not a surprise to you. Yep. How many of you practice mindfulness? Yeah. It's like in the same lane, right, as gratitude. And a definition for it, if you're unfamiliar, it sounds odd to you, is that mindfulness is the basic human ability, we all have it, to be fully present, aware of where we are and what we're doing, and not overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. What a great way to be going into the holidays, don't you think? John has a way of saying that Jesus was always on, I've never liked that statement, Sean, because when I feel like I have to be on, it means that I have to be this thing, this like trumped up version of myself, right? I have to be like, I'm not. That's not what I want to be. But when you say that, this is what I hear. Jesus was mindful. He was present. He was aware of where he was, who he was with, what he was about. He wasn't overwhelmed by the circumstances that surrounded him. He wasn't overreactive. He was grounded in the reality of what was happening, but not overcome by it. And isn't that who we want to be? And so I have kind of my version of mindfulness, and this is a quote, you'll see it kind of everywhere on t-shirts and whatever, bumper stickers, is be here now. That's it. And as I was fretting over like giving this talk today, like the anxiety and over the weekend, I felt like God say to me, it's too bad that you're not talking about something that would relieve stress, which gratitude does, and mindfulness does. That's one of the benefits. It relieves stress, it lowers blood pressure, it helps relationships. And so I have been practicing be here now. That's it. Anyone can do that. Now it's going to come and go, and you don't have to beat yourself up. You do have to get ready, for Thanksgiving. You do have planning to do. You are going to run around. You are going to feel possibly overwhelmed and all of that. Bring it back. Be now. And that, how Ann Voskamp talks about it, and she's an author that I love, and she wrote about gratitude in a book called 1,000 Gifts. And it was the book that I read that started me on, really, the gratitude practice that I have. And so this is my gratitude journal, and she has this saying, how did she put it? She said, I started making a list like a holiday list. Like all of us have lists going on right now, the grocery list, the gift list. People are Christmas shopping already. You're one of those people. Oh, God love you. But the lists. And she said, I wanted to start a list, not of things that I needed or wanted, but things I already have. And she challenged herself to make a list of 1,000 gifts. So I've done the same thing. It's taken me a few years, but it's been amazing, amazing. And if there were more time, I would read some of these to you. In fact, if you want to come up here afterwards, you're welcome to flip through this. It's close, but I would love to share it. So feel free to do that. You're going to laugh at some of the things, like painted toenails is in there more than once, okay? And so is phone calls and prayers, the big stuff, the stuff that really hits home. All of it, part of the 1,000 gifts. So that's up here, as well as some journals that if you want to take and start your own list, please do it. If that's pulling on you at all, please do it. It doesn't even have to be daily. I don't do anything daily. Like, I forgot to put on deodorant this morning, okay? I don't do anything daily, nothing. The results accrue. It doesn't matter if you write down 5 things and then set it down and don't go back for a month. You don't have to beat yourself up. Be here now. And what Ann Voskamp says about that, about the practice of gratitude is, she says it weighs down time. How many of you would like more time? Yep. How many of you would like more peace? How about more levity? A little more laughter, a little more smiles, a little more joy. Be here now. Because right now, the gifts are all around you and in you if you'll take time to notice them and name them. It's important to name them. Because if you don't, they just go. I wouldn't know that I was grateful for painted toenails if I didn't write it down. Right? Gone. One of the other things I have up here are pennies. All right? And I've told you about the penny thing before, right? And some of you have joked with me like, that is a plague. Because the game that I play with pennies is anytime a penny crosses your path, whether they're on the ground, right? They're everywhere. Like you'll find them all over the place, right? Especially when you don't want to find them. Because the game is, when you find one, you have to name something. Name one of the gifts. Gratitude has been known to be like a booster shot for relationships. So if you're struggling with someone in your life, donate that penny to them and name something about them that you are thankful for. Because even when it's bad, there's always something. There is always something to be thankful for. So I've come across pennies a million times and not wanted to see them, and yet every time I do, when I'm in that mode, I kind of have to laugh because it's the practice that keeps coming back to me. So I challenge you to take the penny path. All right, I have 5 minutes left and a lot more to say. So let's see. Let me narrow it down. I want to go back to your place, our place. Read this quote to you, and then I'll give you my own foolish example. All right, so here's the quote. It's by Julian of Norwich, who until this week I thought was a man. Anybody else think Julian of Norwich was a man? The woman. And this is what she said. Here dies another day. during which I have had eyes, ears, hands, and the great world around me. And with tomorrow begins another. Why am I allowed? Every day we get a gift. Every day. Even though it doesn't always feel that way. And one of the quick things I want to say, and there's so much that could be said about this, is you don't have to sugarcoat things to practice gratitude. It gives you perspective, the real full panoramic perspective, because yes, this is true. This horrible thing has happened to me. And I'll put it this way. The Thanksgiving table, many of us go to this week, and we've talked about it before, there's an empty seat, right? It's not just an empty seat. It's no more phone calls, and no more conversations, and no more pumpkin, whatever those things were that Auntie Chrissy would bring. A whole host of things lost and gone. And on my Thanksgiving table, and I know many of you, those things are real. And you will feel it, and you will know it. And for some of us, the bills are there, and man, it's not a turkey this year. Rice and beans. And the phone call that says, the tests aren't good. And all of that is real, and you will bring it with you, and you will sit with it and be asked to give thanks. You absolutely don't want to. And yet, if you name even the little things, candles on the table, glass of wine with turkey, the football game, Monopoly spread across the room, whatever it is, the pink light in the morning when you wake up at 6 to get the bird in the oven. Those things are all real, and they weigh it down. They spread it out because this is true, but this is also true. My alarm is going off, and I don't know how to shut it off. All right, so my last thing. All right, so I'm just going to say these quick things now. This is my be here now jar. Because you get what I meant about that, right? Like, this is true, but this is also true. That is the beauty of gratitude. That is how it brings joy to you in the worst of circumstances. So this jar, this is the be here now jar, and my phone is in it on purpose, because on Thanksgiving, get ready, guys, I'm going to ask everyone who enters our home to put their phone in the be here now jar. Oh my gosh. Now, just think about how terrible that's going to be for the 8 teenagers that are coming to my home. They are going to die. But it's not going to be only hard for them, because my dad will inevitably pull out his phone almost in the middle of dinner to show us pictures and videos and yada yada. Be here now. That's a gift that you could give. It's risky. Believe me, when I thought about this, I'm like, oh my God, they're going to kill me. Take the risk with me. Be here now. My last silly little, I feel like I'm supposed to say it, so I'm going to say it. About us being in our place. That God doesn't owe us. Is my cat. My cat thinks she doesn't need anyone. She thinks she's completely self-sufficient. And I made this comment to a friend of mine on Halloween, and I said, the only time she's ever friendly and wants to be around us is in the morning when it's time to feed her. And so he looked at me and he goes, well, feed her less. Like, oh my gosh. That's brilliant, right? I'm like, okay. So I went home, I told my kids, I'm like, okay, instead of like, feeding her in the morning so I can be done with it, just feed her, right? And do you know, all right, that was Halloween. That cat, I was sitting on the couch, I was working on this, came and sat right next to me, all purry, okay? It's only been 3 weeks, right? Okay? Now, my dog, I don't have to teach, okay? Because that dog is with me all the time. I trip over the dog. Like, she is following me so close that I am like falling down and, Which one do you think is the disciple? Both. Yes, the dog is the perfect example of a disciple. That is what God wants. Follow me, follow me, follow me. Be right there, and I will be engaged with you all the time. But we're also the cat. And this is what he does. He feeds us, feeds us, he feeds us. And it's a little bit at a time. So we keep coming back. I think that's all I have time for. I know it is. So I am going to stop there, and I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving and that you will practice being where you are in the moment here now.